When a couple is having trouble conceiving a child, it's not uncommon for them to reach out to a fertility specialist for help. And while most individuals in this field use traditional methods to assist their patients, one physician in Nevada went a more nefarious route. Family is something that's ingrained in human nature, the drive to be a part of something more and create a legacy that will continue on for generations. But what if someone took that desire to grow their lineage too far? Well, that was the case with a doctor from Nevada that throughout his career secretly inseminated a myriad of women with his sperm during appointments. For hundreds of families that lived in the battle-born states from the 1940s to 1990s, it turned out that their children held the DNA of one unscrupulous gynecologist. So you might be asking how one man could get away with this for so long without anyone finding out. Well, that story begins shortly after World War II, when Dr. Quincy Fortier started his very own practice after medical school in a small town in Nevada. At the start of his career, he helped patients with a variety of ailments, but as time went on, people began to notice that he excelled at fertility work, whether it was wanted or not. One of the earliest noted examples of him being involved with a miracle birth is the case of Dorothy Otis, a woman in her 20s that was not planning on having children, yet suddenly found herself pregnant after a visit to Fortier for a regular checkup. It turns out that during a vaginal examination, he had inseminated her with sperm, and with DNA testing being decades away, she was left confused as to how this could have happened. Even though there are reports of him doing this to women that didn't want children, such as the case of Dorothy, it was much more frequent for the doctor to prey on couples that actually did want to start families but were having trouble conceiving. To them, he was seen as a miracle worker because many who attended his clinic got the results that other doctors couldn't provide. Little did they know his secret method was using his own seed rather than that of the infertile husband. With an incredible track record and no one able to expose him with the science available at the time, Dr. Fortier would move to Las Vegas, where he started up a practice that specialized in fertility. This office is where he would impregnate woman after woman looking for help when trying to have a baby, without ever telling them how he would make it happen. To show just how successful his operation was, not only was he not caught for decades on end, but he was praised by patients, fellow medical professionals, and the community at large during this time, with him even winning an award for Doctor of the Year in 1991. Times were changing, however, as the aging gynecologist was now at risk of facing repercussions for his crimes thanks to the rollout of a new technology called DNA testing. This would allow his victims to scientifically prove that they were not the father. You see, throughout the years, some of Fortier's patients had become suspicious of the fact that their children didn't resemble their dads, and oftentimes would excel academically when no one else in their family had done so before. In a few circumstances, these parents went through the process of having a DNA test done when the tech became available, and upon finding the results, attempted to sue the doctor. A notable court case against Dr. Fortier was Mary Caddick, a woman who alleged that her 2 children were the product of Fortier's insemination practices. In court, the gynecologist pleaded not guilty to the charges, and eventually Mary settled out of court with the physician, a deal that included the stipulation that she would never speak about the court case or the doctor ever again. This would continue as the clinician faced multiple lawsuits from the late 90s to his eventual death in 2006. But the outcomes of each case allowed him to dodge serious repercussions. Even with some minor scandals, he passed away with his reputation mostly intact, as no one understood the extent of what he had done. Things would all change, however, with the help of a new online industry that would allow people to discover the extent of the doctor's misdeeds. We'll learn more about this after a brief word from our sponsor. I can only watch TV and scroll through my phone so many nights while stuck at home, and this murder mystery game, Hunt a Killer, is the best way to switch things up. With everybody stuck inside, what's a better way to pass the time than to solve a mystery? Hunt a Killer brings people together by challenging them to decode ciphers, examine clues, and solve puzzles. It's like an escape room delivered right to your door. There are over 100,000 active subscribers because this game creates an ongoing narrative. You'll learn about the backstories for each of the suspects, their complicated relationships to the victims, and also you'll watch the story unfold as you complete each episode. And the best part of all is part of the proceeds for every box goes to the Cold Case Foundation, an organization that is dedicated to helping with real-life cold cases. I truly am a fan of this product, and right now you can go to huntakiller.com/GFM and use code GFM for 20% off your first box. Again, make sure to use code GFM for your 20% off discount. So I guess that just leaves me with the question, do you have what it takes to be a hunter-killer? Despite decades of medical malpractice and technology existing to prove it, surprisingly, no one had pieced together the extent of what Dr. Fortier had done, evident by the fact that he died a free man in 2006. You have to understand that even though DNA testing was developed in the 80s, for decades it was an expensive analysis that was usually reserved for legal cases. It wouldn't be until the 2010s that companies started to create simple and affordable home tests such as MyHeritage and 23andMe. Even though they were marketed as novel products to see your family's lineage, an unintended consequence of this flood of testing was that the extent of the now dead doctor's wrongdoing was fully comprehended. Upon sending in their swabs, test taker after test taker was greeted with the names of dozens of half-siblings they didn't know existed. The one thing they all had in common was a single gynecologist. With this, the truth started to sink in that a single doctor must have had hundreds upon hundreds of children. To cope with the news that their biological father wasn't who they thought he was, many of these brothers and sisters started online groups to discuss their family stories and experiences. Throughout all these conversations, it often came back to a single question: why? Many assumed Fortier had a god complex, attempting to bring as much of his essence into the world before passing on so that he, in a sense, would never really die. Others concluded that he was a morally confused man who tried his hardest to give his patients the miracle of life by all means necessary. When talking to those who knew the doctor, most considered Fortier to be a relatively tame, well-spoken, and genuine man. But as time has gone on, a more sinister side has been revealed, showcasing just how depraved he could become when no one was looking. The two most horrific accounts that expose the untold evil of this entire case would come from his son, Quincy Fortier Jr., and stepdaughter, Connie Fortier, who both lived with the doctor for a large part of their childhood. In the case of Connie, she was molested and later inseminated by her stepfather. Then after becoming pregnant with his child, was sent away to a home for pregnant teenagers, where she would soon after put her child up for adoption upon giving birth. If that wasn't bad enough, the doctor's biological son, Quincy Jr., would go on to sue his own father for the emotional turmoil he had inflicted against him and his family. But just like the rest of the cases, he never had to face personal responsibility. Quincy would later go on to say, "My father molested everyone. The happiest he ever made me was lying in his coffin dead. That's when I knew I was safe." In conclusion, Dr. Fortier is an example of someone shown to have committed countless crimes, yet was able to live a long and happy life without ever facing punishment for his misdeeds. And to make matters even worse, he wasn't alone with this MO, as multiple other gynecologists across the world have been accused of knowingly inseminating patients with their seed in a similar fashion. We'll never know exactly how many children Fortier had, but at the very least we can take solace in the fact that with the availability of affordable DNA tests, it is unlikely a doctor would be able to get away with a similar career of malpractice ever again. Before I finish this video today, I just want to give a thank you to the documentary Baby God on HBO Max, which provided a lot of the information used here. And I suggest watching it for yourself if you're still interested in learning more about the subject. So with that being said, I'll end the video now. And until next time, thanks for watching.